In this conversation, Thomas reflects on the second pair of establishments that govern human affairs, the educational and the religious. He focuses first on the etymology of university, from the Latin universis, meaning turned into one. Indeed, Thomas speaks of the universe as a single, interdependent mode of being. It is the connective tissue in which all forms of knowledge converge and find their resonance. And yet, the modern university is so often fragmented into silos. Economics is taught as if it is somehow separate from the integral functioning of the planet. Even physics is taught in a reductionistic and mechanistic way that precludes a more poetic understanding of our place in the larger cosmos. For Thomas, the universe must be seen as the primary mode of governance, of economics, of health, and of education. Our centers of learning should be reimagined in an integral manner within this larger cosmic context. We must come to see the university as the human institution in which the universe reflects on itself. In other words, education should offer a portal in which the small self of the individual can converge with the larger self of the universe. For Thomas, such an integral worldview can unleash human creativity and help us align our institutions with the living systems of our planet. Beyond education, Thomas also critiques the major religious establishments of our time for failing to address the ecological crisis. With their outsized focus on the human, they have not given us the reverence needed for the earth as divine manifestation. Thomas traces this disconnect back to the Black Death of 14th century Europe, which gave rise to a spiritual vision of detachment from a world of suffering. What we need to recover in our own time, then, is a sacredness of the earth as our common home.
I've mentioned that there were four basic establishments that govern human affairs. The political, the economic, the intellectual, and the religious. Of these, each determines the other in some way. These are not separate again. These are aspects of a single pattern of relationships between the humans and the other components of the planet. Each governs the others in its own particular way. Now, most of all, perhaps, the university needs to be considered because the university teaches the others. The university teaches economics. The university teaches political thought and governance. The universities teach religious thought and even theology and morality. The university teaches health. The university teaches the whole pattern of things. And so that the university has a certain controlling presence that needs to be considered rather carefully. It's a strange thing that the sciences that tend to be a kind of an ultimate appeal to what's real, what's not real, and what's valid rationally or into human understanding. It teaches that the universe is a single interacting reality composed of an unmeasured number of beings of different types and different order of magnitude, exist in a certain sequence in time. They do not all exist at the same time moment. But throughout the vast extent in space and throughout the long sequence of transformations in time, the universe is a single integral entity. And particularly, when we come to the solar system, we come to the planet Earth, it's a single interdependent mode of being. But strangely enough, the university can't follow through on this. It cannot teach the unity of the planet Earth, or it cannot establish its own functioning within that context. For instance, in its teaching of the political order, its teaching of the medicine, its teaching of economics, its teaching of religion or morality, it doesn't itself function within the unity of the planet Earth. For instance, it does not in economics teach that the human economy is an integral part of an Earth economy, that there's a single economy. It doesn't teach that there's a single economy of the other components together with the human component. It teaches economics as though economics was a human process that merely used the Earth for its own human benefit. It doesn't teach that economics must be a distribution of life support to the whole community, to the Earth community. For instance, in sociology, it doesn't teach that the human society is a component of the Earth society and ultimately of the universe society. And that humans have no meaning, and human society has no meaning apart from the Earth community, the life community, and, of course, ultimately the universe community. So, this is the great reason, it seems to me, of why we're into such trouble now. We're into such trouble in our relationship with the planet. We're ruining the planet. We're poisoning the planet, oblivious of the fact that we poison the planet, we're poisoning ourselves. Whatever we do to the planet, we do to ourselves. But somehow the university doesn't teach it. If we make the planet sick, we make ourselves sick. If we poison the water, we poison ourselves. If we extinguish the rainforest, well, we're in danger of extinguishing ourselves. If we deny habitat to the salmon, then we're eventually going to be in trouble with our own habitat, because it's a single habitat, not two habitats. A habitat for the animals and the birds, and a habitat for humans. We live in a single habitat. So, the university doesn't teach that. It's not the basis of the teaching. So we need to rethink the university. Now, my own approach to the university is that the universe is the primary university, is the primary teacher, is the primary instructor, is the primary governor, is the primary health system, but particularly is the primary educator. We have to learn from the universe. We have to be attuned to the universe. We have to listen to the universe. We have to listen to the planet Earth. We have to listen to the rivers and the mountains and the streams. We have to listen. We have to learn. And because we don't know anything except what we learn from our senses. It's why we have ears. It's why we have ears to hear with and eyes to see with, and the capacity to feel, capacity to experience fragrance, the capacity to taste. All this is the way in which we get educated. And the education is the education of the universe, it's the education of Earth, it's the education given to us by life in all its variety of forms. The birds educate us to fly. And if we pay attention to it, and we did pay attention to its physical mode of being, and eventually we learned to simulate flight itself. We don't fly. The way birds fly, we can't fly that well. But we do learn, that's just a kind of a mechanical process that we learn, but we learn beauty. We learn how to be fulfilled, how a human reaches personal, integral, exalted mode of existence. We learn this from the birds, we learn it from the flowering plants, we learn it from everything, provided we become literate in this. Literate, that's not a quite appropriate word etymologically, but we have to literate in the sense of a capacity to understand what we see, a capacity to understand. We say a person literate when we can write an alphabetic process or some form of impress that we make on matter that we see and can read and get sense from. But there is another type of literacy, which is a literacy of sensitivity and of comprehension of a more important way of communicating. And if we don't learn the language of the natural world, then all our writing is not going to have any depth in it because we won't know anything substantial. We'll know a lot of details and we may learn a lot of technology, but we won't learn how to commune with the deeper meaning of things, or how to celebrate in the full experience, the ecstatic awareness of what it is to be alive in this deeper sense. So, the universe has to be taken as our primary instructor, our primary teacher, our primary school, our primary university. And so, what does that make the university? That makes the university the human institution in which the universe reflects on itself in a special mode of conscious self-awareness and communicates that awareness to the human community. The human university is that establishment wherein the universe reflects on itself. Now, the human consciousness is not simply a context in which humans know the world about us, but it's the way in which the universe knows itself, because the universe brought us into being. So, the human intelligence is a process whereby the universe fashions a way of self-knowledge of itself. And in a corresponding way, taking the human intelligence itself, it finds itself in finding the university. Each of us, the human finds itself in the universe finds itself in the human. Now, the university is that context in which all this takes place at a very high degree of intensity or of comprehensiveness, and then communicates that experience to the larger human community. So the university has a very, very important role in all the different schools that the university is composed of, because the university has its many different aspects. Humans need to know a lot of things. I have to know something about how we feed ourselves, which becomes economics, how we feed and shelter ourselves and clothe ourselves, which is all economics. We need to know how to govern ourselves, which is our political life, and so forth. All of this we should be able to learn from the university and through our role in relationship with the universe. But if we cut ourselves off from the universe and begin a process of learning, and our schools of governance get disassociated from the cosmology, from the governance of the universe, the governance of the planet Earth, and we simply think of governance in the sense of governing human relations to ourselves and how to establish an exploitative society in relationship to the natural world about us, and make our governance an assault on the planet instead of being a subsystem of the planetary governance, then something has gone terribly wrong, because the purpose of governance should be to set things in order by some ordering authority. Now, the ordering authority is the community itself. That's where democracy has something very basic in it, because it's the people governing themselves. But it fails in the sense that it's unwilling to accept the fact that the human participates in the larger governance, which again, if we have a democracy, a government of people, then if we have a planet that's self-governing, we need a planetary governance. Or within life, we need a biocracy, perhaps, or we need a recognition that life is a self-governing process, and that any phase of life needs to see itself as participating in this larger dimension of governance. But if we establish governance as support a predatory process as regards the rest of the planet, then we're going to end up with the ruined situation that we're in at the present time. And the only remedy for it is to establish our schools of governance and different principles. That just has to do with the political aspect of the university. But it holds for the whole process. But the key to the whole process in all the different schools of the university is the unity of the community, including the totality of the planetary community. So, law schools need to teach that the non-human world has rights that humans are morally and legally bound to respect. And it needs to teach that every being has at least three rights: the right to be, the right to exist, that is, the right to habitat, a place to be, and the right to fulfill its role in the ever-renewing processes of nature. These rights should form the basis of our jurisprudence, not the right to property or the right to human self-governance as an absolute. To frame the Constitution, such as the American Constitution that grants rights only to humans, is to break the great covenant of the universe, the great covenant of existence, which is the covenant that binds all things together in a single, integral enterprise. Now, what's important about this is that if rights begin to be limited to some portion of that community, and if that portion of the community is granted rights to be predator in relationship to all other beings, then the whole functioning of legal processes is in trouble. And we'll end up with the type of planet that we have, a planet that is suffering terribly in its constitution. So the legal order needs to be changed considerably. So with the School of Medicine, there's need to reconstitute the schools of medicine on the basis that there is a single health of the planet. And the schools of medicine, particularly at the present time in this country, needs to establish a program of restoring the health to the surroundings, a health to the planet, a health to the bioregion, so that humans are participating in air that has well-being, water that is participates is integral with itself, has an integral health, and soil that's integral with its health, because if any of this ceases to be, to have a healthy structure, then it becomes pervasive. Then the schools of science that the universities have, in some ways, the study of physics constitutes the normative science or the normative reference that tends to pervade the other sciences. Then the sciences, or the study of physics, needs to be taken seriously in the establishment of a unity of the universe, the unity of the planet Earth, and it needs to do one other thing, though. The difficulty with teaching of physics is its reductionism to mechanistic random particles, which is not integral. The teaching of physics needs to recognize that the universe is composed of a single set of relationships. It does teach that, the physical order, but it doesn't include the fact that the poetry of Shakespeare is as much earth, or is as much a part of the universe as are, say, the mountains or the stars or whatever, because it's one universe. Now, physics has to recognize that is the physics of measurement, that is not the whole of the universe. It's studying a dimension of the universe. It's not studying the totality of the universe. So that the teaching of the universe requires much more than mathematical measurement. In a sense, the the poets are deeper into the universe than the physicists. The poets go deeper into the controlling forces of the universe than the physicists do, because the poets get into the dynamics of the universe at a level of meaning. It gets into the deeper form of the universe. It gets into the music of the universe. It gets into the beauty. And it participates in celebration. The universe is celebration. The universe is not just physical particles interacting with each other, it's celebration. And the particles themselves are dancing, so to speak. But to describe it as dancing, as celebration, as song, as music, is a way of looking at the universe, and the real universe that physics is not equipped to deal with in what it's doing. Although, to understand the music of the universe, we need to do the work that the physicists do. So it's not to negate or diminish or to lessen the intensity of the work of quantitative analysis, of quantitative study. We cannot get fully to one of these without the other. You cannot get to the deeper music of the universe until we know the physics of the universe. But the understanding of these different aspects of the university needs to see that each of the schools of the university, the medical school, the law school, the school of religious studies, the school of governance, the school of law, all of these are dimensions of a single reality. And that these are supportive of each other. They are not isolated modes of being. Right now, there's no relationship between the School of Business Administration, say, and the School of Chemistry, or the teaching of chemistry, or the teaching of biology and chemistry, of course, are closely related, but history, human history, anthropology, sociology, these tend to be separate from, and the more humanistic sciences tend to be absorbed into the more mechanistic sciences, and both of them ultimately fail in leading to an integral educational or a process or an integral vision of understanding of what we're about or what the universe is about. So, going on to business administration, as we've mentioned, we need to understand that the first principle of a viable human economy is a viable earth economy. If the earth economy is not viable, then the human economy cannot be viable. So it's the absurdity of a rising gross human product with a declining gross earth product. It's so obvious that a person wonders. Well, you just have to wonder where people think we're going with our economy. Where do we think that it's leading to when we see the sources being extinguished and are trying to substitute a human process of reproduction, that is a human contrived process of reproduction of salmon, after we've destroyed the natural system of reproduction that has produced such amazing abundance of salmon, such amazing abundance of marine life, and to overfish the marine world and not to enter into its dynamics of ever-renewing processes, then a person has to wonder about an economy that doesn't recognize that. There's something else, of course, that's very basic to this, and that has to do with the school of education. And we have to question even whether the education of the human order, where it's going now. The education originally, of course, was education in the way in which humans fitted into the natural systems, and the way in which the human is educated together with the other than human, the other components of the planet. It's one education. They're not two educations. It's one education. And Maria Montessori understood this very well in her book on the education of the human potential. Education of the Human Potential. It's a series of lectures that she gave in the 1930s, and which was printed only in the late 40s. But there she explains how to educate 6-year-olds. And she indicates there that there's a need that the 6-year-old needs to be associated with and to understand its center at the center of the universe, and that this comes instinctively for children. They understand immediately that they are fulfilled in the universe, and we should be able to understand that the universe is fulfilled in the child. The child's fulfilled in the universe is fulfilled in the child. The child awakens to a universe and reaches out to the universe, is at home in the universe. And the child needs to be integrated with the universe the way it takes place in the Omaha ceremony for a child being introduced soon after birth to the heavens, to the sun, moon, stars, to all the powers of the heavens, then introduced to the powers of the atmosphere, the powers of the earth, the powers in the earth, so that the child is bonded in a very lovely way, not simply with the human, not simply with the divine, but with the universe. So the education needs to be universe education. It's the only education there is. Again, there's not two educations, there's only one. And it's the universe educating itself. And in its human intelligence, the universe is educating itself in a special way, while the human knows the universe educating itself in the human. So, in schools of education, this type of education is something other than the type of education that is merely humanistic education or religious education. Sometimes it's the religious dimension is the high mode of the education, and there's something to be said for that, except that if it's apart from the manifestation of the divine in the natural world or in the universe, then even as religion, it doesn't function. So the education from an early period can be the training of the child or the making of the child autistic to the natural world from the very beginning. If we take the child out of the natural world, put the child in simply in a human world or a divine world, then we have distorted the total process. So the schools of education need to teach this type of education based on the cosmology of education. This gives some idea of how the various schools of the university need to be restructured in a new context of understanding. And then there's one other thing that I would suggest as regards the teaching of the university. It has to do with celebration of its own role. It needs to celebrate the creativity of the universe, and it needs to celebrate itself as a context in which the universe itself comes to itself. That is what is the purpose of existence, is for the universe to come to itself. It's we're all in that quest of fulfillment. We come to ourselves in each other. It's what the communion process is. When I say the universe is a communion of subjects, not a collection of objects, it has to do with the capacity of every being for presence to every other being in the universe. And in that way, it's the coming together of the particular self with the great self. And that is what the existence of any mode of being is. It's the coming together of the particular reality in itself as a great reality, because each mode of being is a mode of expression of the universe itself. So that we find ourselves in the larger pattern of things. And the value of this is that this puts us beyond particularism. It teaches us the distinction of things, but not the separation of things. The distinction of things is most important, because without the distinction of things, everything loses its meaning. Each thing is a different thing. Each thing is unique. Each thing is particularized. The particular thing is distinct from, but not separate from, the larger dimension of things. We need to develop our distinction of things, because the universe itself is enhanced by the difference of things. St. Thomas mentions difference, which is the perfection of the universe. But at the same time, he says the order of the universe is the ultimate and noblest perfection in things. But it has to be the order of difference. Difference is most important. The difference of these various areas of study, the various schools of the university, is of utmost importance. But they're all come together in their manifestation of the cosmological order of things. And the order of things is the great self. We find ourselves in the universe, and each particular thing finds itself in the larger realm of the universe, of the planet Earth, the solar system, the universe. But we, strangely enough, although we know so much about the universe in our specialized sciences, the universe doesn't function in the other aspects of reality. The planet Earth doesn't function as the planet Earth. There's no such, it's a school of sociology or the school of medicine and so forth. The the planet Earth or the health of the Earth is not subject to discuss, or the economy of the universe. In the School of Economics, well, they say that's a biological problem. It doesn't belong to economics, and so forth. So that's rather what I have to say about the university and about education in general. One of the four basic establishments that's controlling the planet at the present time, particularly controlling the American scene, is the church, the religious establishment in our Western society. The Christian church might be considered as the central establishment. There are the other religious traditions, the very strong biblical tradition, Jewish tradition, and the Buddhist tradition has a strong position in America at the present time. It's has much less establishment. Islam has something of establishment also. But together, these religious establishments are playing a significant role in the life of the American society and indirectly in the larger pattern of world affairs. But none of these seem to be able to critique the present devastation of the planet that humans are bringing about, because they fail the way the other establishments fail, by establishing a type of discontinuity between the human and the other components of the planet Earth in such a way that the planet Earth is suffering tremendous damage. And the devastation of the Earth also is a devastation of the human. It's a devastation of everything on the Earth. Because you cannot damage one part of the system without damaging the whole business. So, how did it all come about? Well, it all came about, a person might say, fundamentally, out of the religious and humanist traditions of the classical world. Because these are the ones that first gave such strong affirmation to the divine mode of being and to the human mode of being, that the universe as a mode of being began to be neglected, or the planet Earth, that the natural world began to be neglected and to be left to the exploiters. It ceased to have its sacred nature. It ceased to have that reverence from the human that's needed, because if the Earth is no longer revered, then we'll devastate it. And if we permit the devastation, we can clearly see that it's no longer revered. It's no longer seen as divine manifestation. If it's not seen as divine manifestation, then it ceases to function in the way in which it should normally function, and so becomes subject to predatory relationships on the part of the human. So a person asks the role of the religious establishment in regard to the new, more viable future for the human and for the planet Earth. The first thing I would say would be that the Earth as divine manifestation needs to be asserted very clearly. It needs to be communicated as a first part of a tradition, certainly a Western society. In India, you have the Buddhist world, which has a somewhat different approach. The Hindu world is clearly committed to the fact that the visible world is manifestation of the divine world. But particularly in the Western world, there is a type of withdrawal from the dynamics of the natural world. Now, how did it take place? It took place to a large extent from the 13th or 14th century experience of the Black Death or the plague, when something like a third of Europe died. At that time, the people had no sense of germs. They had no way of explaining what was happening except to figure a moral cause, that the world had become wicked, God was punishing the world, and the best thing to do would be to be redeemed out of the world. So the religious attention began to be turned toward redemption processes and a spirituality of detachment from the planet. A person gets the spirituality of Thomas à Kempis, for instance, which is a spirituality of detachment from human society, detachment from the total physical world, and as well as from even the human world of secular affairs. And it was a withdrawal into a world of piety and devotion. And this was something different from earlier mystical traditions, for instance, in what's known as the Victorines, Richard of St. Victor and Hugh of St. Victor. These were Rhineland mystics of the 13th century. And they had a spirituality that was committed to the natural world as manifestation of the divine. And so also was a person like Bonaventure and his way of the ascent of the mind to God, the journey of the mind to God through the manifestation of the divine in the natural world. So the Western religious tradition is not alienated in its basic structure and functioning from the natural world, the way in which it has become alienated since the 14th century. At that time, this alienation developed into a way of expressing itself in the dance of death, which was invented in the 15th century. This went on from the 14th and 15th century. When we get the art of dying, there are 40 different manuscripts of that work showing how widespread it was at the time, because this was before printing came in. And there are 40 different manuscripts. And a short time, relatively short time, indicates that it's a very widespread thing. So that the art of dying came into being, and a spirituality where a person was taught that the only thing worthwhile in life is what you take with you when you die. That is, there was the sense that only eternal values should be considered worth dealing with. And we have the morality plays that developed. The whole English tradition of drama developed out of the morality plays. And the morality plays were based on this principle because they came into being mainly in the 14th, 15th centuries. They reached back into the earlier centuries, but the ones that are most impressive were for 13th, 14th, 15th centuries, and particularly the everyman play. That is based on this principle that only your virtues go with you when you die, and so you need to be detached from the things of time if you're going into the world of eternity. Now, in the 16th century, this all turned into Puritanism. There was a disdain in the 16th century, a widespread disdain for the intellectual development of the 13th century. It was all considered vanity, all considered unworthy of the message of God, that this was contained in the scripture, and we had to go back to the scripture, so that there was a new development of the Bible, and printing had come in. As I've mentioned, printing came in the middle of the 15th century, and so in the 16th century, just thousands of Bibles could be printed, or an unlimited number of Bibles could be printed and made available for everybody. So the Bible became, in its written form, or the revelation in its written form, as we designate the Bible, became the central referent of the people. And the manifestation of the divine in the natural world began to diminish. So this continued on through all the discussion, almost all the religious discussion that took place since the 16th century has been, how are you saved? Are you saved by faith, by works, or what? And then the teaching, the catechetical teaching, is biblical teaching. To live in a revelatory world apart from the Bible began to be unthinkable. But the truth of the thing is that we live in a world of divine manifestation in the universe. The universe is divine manifestation, planet Earth, all the beauty of things, the wonder. That's the source of religion. If we lose that source of the beauty, the wonder, the awesomeness, even the forebodings, the frightening aspect of the natural world, all that tells us something of the divine. So it's revelatory. And to lose that immediacy, then a person is into a verbal revelatory experience over against a revelatory experience that invades the whole sense perception of the human, becomes deficient. It's a clarification or a specification, but it cannot be an elimination of the natural world. And of course, those that perceive the divine in and through the cosmological order also need the guidance and the special things that the biblical world can tell us. But the desacralization of the natural world was a terrible thing, because once that was done, this alienation, then the natural world was vulnerable. And the problem was how to move from the life as we have it now to life, to the millennial world, to the life of fulfillment, of salvation. Francis Bacon figured it all out, so to speak, when he says, well, if we don't have the revelation of the natural world, let's torture. Now, you use the word torture. Let's forcefully get to the deep secrets of how nature functions, so that we can build a world of our own. There was a certain disappointment by the 15th century that the millennial vision had not been fulfilled. The millennial vision, where the promise had been made, as St. John tells us in the last chapters of his book of Revelations, that 1,000 years would come when the dragon would be chained up and humans would experience a blissful period beyond the human condition before the final phase, a brief phase, when the earthly community would be transferred to a heavenly setting. Now, this promise had not been fulfilled. Life was still as miserable as ever. And so there was a dream, a thought that let's do it by human effort. We couldn't get rid of the promise. We can never get rid of the millennial vision. We have to have the millennium as a term to work toward. But if we don't have it by divine gift, if we have to make it ourselves, then the natural world has to be transformed by human effort, technology, and industry, by production and consumption, into a wonder world of fulfillment, a world beyond the pain and suffering that humans are subject to, that we are foolish to remain with the fragments of life and the suffering when we have the skills to bring it about and the resources to bring it about on the planet. So the planet becomes vulnerable. And the existing phase is not a satisfactory phase, and almost any change is a change for the better. That type of a spirit tends to invade the human mind, the human thought, the human emotions, the human effort. Needs to be directed in this way toward building a satisfying world out of the planet Earth. And if the Earth is damaged, then it's not that worthwhile anyway. If it can't be transformed into a more blissful world, well, let's take the consequences. So a type of violent assault on the planet Earth begins to take place, and nobody feels bad about it. The religious people, they don't even feel it. They have lost the sense that the natural world is divine presence. It's a mode of divine presence. It's where our way to fulfillment comes. So that's the only way in which a person can explain or understand, even in some minimal way, what's happening from the religious angle. And a person is shocked. In each of these cases, a person is shocked by an economics that tries to have an advanced economics for the human by degrading the economy of the natural world. A person is shocked by the university that tries to set up an educational program that is not a continuation of the educational program of the planet. So, too, we have to be shocked of the fact that the churches are not protesting in any significant way to the devastation of the divine presence in the natural world. That it's not protesting the destruction of its own basic resource, because the earth is the basic resource for everything, whether it's education or governance or religion or economics or whatever. So we get this new situation of the 19th and 20th century particularly. So at the present time, where life has been secularized at the human level, we still are trying to keep our relationship with the divine, and that's the extraordinary thing. We've lost the way to the divine through the place of our dwelling, the way to the divine through the divine in the natural world, and we try to go to the divine through the Bible. So, preach the Bible, and you get saved for eternity, and what happens to the natural world is irrelevant. So, this is the difficulty that's happening. But at the same time, just like in economics, there's the new International Society for Ecological Economics that's functioning on a global scale, and it's beginning to be effective. Just there is now a movement at the United Nations level to establish a charter for the Earth, an Earth Charter, to defend the rights of the Earth in the United Nations, just as there is in government a strong movement to establish ways of protecting the natural world and to preserve the integrity of the planet. So too, it does exist in the religious traditions of the world, and particularly perhaps in the Western religious tradition, some strong movements toward a more integral relationship with the planet. In the Protestant churches, there's in their great council, or the extensive council that they had in Korea a few years ago, they developed the phrase that their objective was for peace, justice, and the integrity of creation. Instead of making it primary, they attach it on. Christian churches find it necessary in their thinking because the human is so dominant. They can only get to the natural world by attaching it within their order of social human concerns, instead of making the human concerns viable within the dynamics of the natural world. They want to make the natural world viable within the dynamics of the human. So they develop this sense of peace, justice of humans, and the integrity of creation. So there are a number of details. There's just a very large number of projects that could be identified in the churches. And one of these would be Genesis Farm Project, in the economics, in government, and in the universities, particularly in the University in Education with David Orr at Oberlin College. There's, in all of these, there exists a sense of shaping what I refer to as an ecozoic period. And that should be the hope that we should have, that we can have. And I have a certain expectation that we can move into the ecozoic period through these four establishments.